Hi, I'm Sanja Markovic, and this is SEO in 2025.
Sanja, what's your number one SEO tip for SEO in 2025?
Well, for all the SEOs that will work on site migrations in 2025, my tip is to look at it as of moving houses. You want to make sure that all the valuable items are not lost on the way. And also, you want to make sure that your new house is much cleaner, nicer, and tidier compared to your old house.
And if you've moved house a couple of times, then you'll certainly be aware of the fact that some removal people can be nightmares.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think a lot of us have experience with this, and it can a lot of times end up as a nightmare. But this is why it's important that we plan everything correctly. That we need some people to help us. In SEO terms, this would translate to knowledgeable teams that will work on site migrations. So we need to make sure that everything on our old website is kind of saved into boxes that we will then move to our new house, which will be our new site, which will, in a technical way, in a content way, user experience way, hopefully be better than our previous ones, because this is one of the goals of site migrations. So we need to have experienced teams. We need to make decisions based on data. We need to establish really good communication with all the teams that we are working with. And this is the best way to ensure that SEO recommendations are implemented properly and we have a successful site migration.
Nice analogy. So it's probably worthwhile defining exactly what you mean by site migration, because that can mean different things. It could mean domain migration or server migration or CMS migration or something else. Do you have anything specific in mind?
Well, no, I think, as you say, site migration can happen for many reasons, and it can involve migration from to a new CMS, changing international strategies. So it can also apply to any kind of business. And this is also why I think that my tip is quite important because, if you're an SEO specialist, you will probably in your career work on site migrations, and there are certain steps that we need to follow. Well, I know that there are also cases that even when we do follow these steps, a mess can happen because not everything depends on us. But I think it's really important tip because any kind of SEO will work on it, and it can apply to any industry. It can have multiple scenarios. So I'm not really referring to any specific scenario. I'm just referring more in general.
Shall we talk about preparation a little bit first? I mean, how do you go about preparing for a site migration?
Yeah. Well, you mean like for the whole project, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we have to do and how long it takes.
Okay, so normally you start with defining all the phases of site migration, which normally depends if we will work on the new site, on the old site, on both. So we will launch the site. So I normally outline the main phases of site migration, and then I outline all the activities that we will conduct. This normally applies to any kind of migration. There will probably be some differences. For example, if we are going to migrate multiple domains, because we're changing international strategy, if we're just changing CMS, so this can be a little bit different. But normally, I would say that site migration has the planning process can start from defining from the first initial planning phase, which includes defining objectives of the site migration, milestones, timelines. So we need to have some plan to follow further. Then pre-launch preparation, which is the phase where we work on our legacy site and also on our new site, our dev site. So in this phase, we would probably conduct a lot of audits on our legacy site from the technical standpoint, but also content audits, which are really important because a lot of times I see that content gets kind of sacrificed for the sake of good looking website. And this is a really big mistake because we need content to drive traffic. So this is a really important phase where we can decide which is the priority content, which is really important content that we need to migrate, which is the content that we can retire from our website.
So what metrics will you look at for that? Is it simply a matter of which content pieces are driving traffic?
Yes. Well, I would normally use Google Analytics and Google Search Console to identify the pages that are bringing the highest portion of clicks from different countries, or that I would also use these tools to identify the keywords that are actually driving traffic to these pages. So, because this is also something that we need to look at, so that we can kind of protect these keywords when we are moving the content from one site to another. So you would normally look at clicks, click-through rate, to define the important pages.
Do you normally like keeping the URLs when you're migrating, if that's a possibility, or as long as if you 301 direct, you wouldn't be that concerned about that?
Well, so you need to make sure that the content is there, right? And then you have to deploy a 301 redirects from the legacy page to the new page, because this is the signal for Google that we are moving from one place to another. It's a permanent redirect that tells them, okay, so I used to have this page, but now I'm permanently going to move this content to this page, and this is an equivalent to what I used to have. So it's a signal for them. And it's also really good from the standpoint of user experience, because imagine that you go on a website that you usually go to, and suddenly there were some changes in the links that they included in their content, and you try to click on this link and you expect this will take you to the page that will offer the content that you're looking for. But if this is not done correctly, then in the site migration, it can take you to the homepage. But this is not the content you want to see. You want to see the equivalent to what you have seen before. So we also need to make sure that the pages are equivalent when it comes to deployment of the redirect plan, also from the standpoint of user experience.
So how much time, ideally, would you look for between starting the migration thought process and actually implementing the migration?
Well, it depends really on how many aspects we have to have in mind and how big is this migration going to be. But it can take. It also depends on if you have a whole SEO team just dedicated to that, or they're working for an agency, so they have like multiple projects. But I can say, yeah, the initial planning project phase can take, I think, like a month, and then pre-preparation when you work on the dev side and the legacy side, this can take from 3 months, 4 months. It really depends on the size of the website. Then we have the testing phase where we are going to test our dev site and to make sure that everything is fine before we go to the launch. So, that our website is going to be properly internally linked, that we are following all the SEO technical best practices, that it's going to be crawlable, indexable. And this is also something that happens a lot because, of course, when we are working on the dev site version, we need to make sure that Google is not able to crawl and index this website. But then, of course, if we don't do that, it will create a complete mess in our search results and also for us. But then it also happens quite a lot that on the launch day, we forget to remove the directives from the robot.txt that tells Google not to that our site should not be crawled. We also remove the directives that tell Google that the website should not be indexed. And then it's 10 days past our migration and we are like, okay, where is our website? It's not on Google. So we need to really make sure that we are, this is why I really like to have a plan with all the activities listed. And then you can just check out all the boxes and say, okay, I did this, I did that. And then this is how you will make sure you didn't miss any step.
And one of the ways to do that is to, of course, have conversations with as many people as possible internally. So are there specific job titles that you're wanting to ensure that they're involved in the migration discussions?
Yeah, well, of course, as a specialist, we're the most important parts here. But yeah, well, we are not actually the most important. Everyone is important, but apart from us, I think web designers, developers, of course, the project manager who will be managing this whole project. But yeah, I think for SEOs, the most important is that we have kind of easy communication with the dev team, because they're the ones that are going to implement everything we say. Yeah, this is the most important, I think, communication channel for us with them.
So when is a site migration considered to be successful? What metrics do you look at and then relax in the knowledge that everything's gone okay?
Okay. Well, normally, so it is really common, and this is a natural thing that after a site migration, there is a decline in traffic because, of course, Google algorithms, they still need to figure out that we did site migration. So there is naturally going to be a decline in positions and also traffic. But migration is considered to be successful when after this short period of time, we are back on track. So we moved all the content, we moved all the links, everything, and we are now performing as on the same spot as we were before, or even better, hopefully. So this is considered a successful site migration. And the metrics you would look at, well, first of all, you would look at how your website is indexed. Then you would look at the ranking position and visibility you have in the search results. If you were targeting multiple markets, you would be doing this for multiple markets. And of course, traffic and user engagement metrics. So if our goal was also to improve user experience on the site, we can look at average time on site, bounce rate, as well as conversions. And all these metrics can tell us if we had successful site migration.
So what are the most common reasons that site migrations fail?
Well, first of all, because no one is actually listening to the SEO teams. Yes. So we provide a lot of recommendations on how to do things, but oftentimes, we live in the real world, so people do not account for a limited budget in limited time. So what they usually do is they cut SEO for the sake of other activities, and this is when we have a problem because someone did not deploy correctly a redirect plan. This is another reason why site migrations fail, because in this case, we would lose all our authority that we used to have. So it would be really hard. Well, we will have to start building it up from scratch. So I would say this is also a failure example. Yeah. So yeah, I think these are the main reasons why site migrations fail.
So, I mean, how do you avoid making mistakes? I would imagine that if you have something like a Gantt chart and that you have responsibilities for different people, you have time scales in order to ensure that something is completed beforehand and during the migration process. Is that a good way to try and ensure that things are done? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you have a chart where you say, okay, we have to do this in the planning phase, then we have to do this in a pre-launch preparation phase, and then you have, all the audits that you have to do. So you need to make sure that you did it. And from these learnings, you applied this learning on the new sites. Then you have the testing phase with different activities you have to do. Then you have the launch day phase where you also have to be on track and control that everything is working fine, that the site is getting indexed. And then you have the monitoring phase, which is a little bit more relaxed because then you already did everything and you just have to monitor and find issues or say, well, or not, or don't find any issue. So yeah, this is the best way to do it.
Should SEOs ever recommend against some form of migration? I'm thinking maybe of something like domain names. Maybe you might have some brand team just looking to move all the content just to a .com from all the country websites, and you have a lot of value already, or something else. So is there anything like that where an SEO would actually say, hang on, this may not be a good idea to do at all?
Well, it depends on what we think that the actual benefit would be of a site migration, which could mean that, okay, so in the example you gave, so you have, for example, one domain and you have multiple domains that are targeting different countries and you already have authorities on these domains, but actually moving them to one GTLD would be maybe even more beneficial because you will consolidate all this authority on one domain. So of course, considering that you do the site migration correctly. But maybe in some instances when we talk about rebranding, maybe in this case, it would depend more on a business decision rather than SEO decision. So there are cases, but yeah, I think this will really, really, really depend on specific goals and what is expected to be achieved with the site migration.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time figuring out what they should do in order to understand migrations better in 2025?
I think they should stop spamming people on LinkedIn about
Spamming people.
yes, about backlinks. Yeah, I think a lot of SEOs. Yeah, I don't know. I just receive a lot of spammy messages every day almost to buy backlinks, and yeah, I just don't believe in these practices. So I would recommend these SEOs to stop.
Stop spamming Sanja in 2025.
Yeah, yeah, and focus on learning about site migration.
Sanja Markovic is a senior SEO specialist, and you can find her over at webcertain.com. Sanja, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.